They threw stones at a quiet soul, not knowing they were waking a storm that would one day flood their world. You hear that silence? That's the sound of regret, choking those who once spoke so loud, so proud, when they laughed at you. Those who pointed fingers, smirked, whispered behind your back. Now they sit in the wreckage of their own arrogance. They mocked what they didn't understand. They picked a fight with the universe and thought they were just picking on a person. But you weren't just anyone. You were chosen, and that's a war they could never win. They thought they were battling a weak mind, an easy target, someone beneath them. But now their pride is breaking ribs from the inside out. The tables didn't just turn, they flipped, cracked, and came crashing down on their ego like an avalanche. Every insult they threw at you was a seed that grew into their own downfall. They tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were a root, deep, ancient, and impossible to kill. Before we go deeper, Chosen One, do your part. Like and subscribe to help spread this message. When you engage, it signals to the platform that this message is bigger than algorithms. It becomes a wave, a signal flare, a call to every silent warrior out there who thought they were alone. We need each other now more than ever. Now listen carefully. You were never stupid, never weak, never lost. You were hidden, shielded, wrapped in silence by the universe itself, because your mission wasn't meant to be seen by those who wouldn't understand it. The power inside you, the light they tried to dim, it made them uncomfortable. That's why they came at you. Not because you were nothing, but because you were everything they could never be. The truth is, they weren't just laughing at you. They were mocking the universe's decision to choose you. But what they didn't know is that the universe doesn't lose. It doesn't pick favorites. It picks forces. And you, Chosen One, are a force of correction in a world gone numb to truth. You didn't need to speak to shake the room. Your existence alone disturbed their comfort. Your growth made them itch. Your silence screamed. And let's be honest, some of you forgot who you were. You cried alone. You questioned your light. You begged the universe for answers, thinking maybe they were right, maybe you were broken. No. That doubt was planted. That loneliness was a test. And now, as your light sharpens, so does your responsibility. Never again question why you walk alone. Stars don't need company to shine. Understand this. The power of being chosen is not just a blessing, it's a weapon. Your presence haunts them because it exposes their lies. Your rise reminds them they missed something precious when they were busy playing superior. You make them confront what they tried to bury, the truth that they saw your worth and still chose to overlook it. Now their peace is shattered. Their fake confidence has turned brittle. They're watching you glow in places they swore you'd never reach, and it's destroying them, quietly, daily. You don't need revenge. You are the consequence. Chosen One, your journey is not about revenge, it's about remembering. Don't dim now, don't hide, don't apologize for being everything they couldn't handle. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting fate, and no one wins that war. So before we go deeper, if you're one of the chosen ones they arrogantly labeled as unintelligent, if their mockery ever lit a fire inside you, then this message was carved in time just for you. Drop the number 77 in the comments if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or laughed at. And you know it's finally your season to rise. Engage now, because when you do, you're not just helping yourself. You're helping this truth reach others who need it just as bad. This isn't just a video, it's a signal. And now, let's go all the way in, step by step. Stay sharp, stay with it. If you're truly chosen, you'll feel it pulling you to the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. They took your silence for stupidity. Now they're choking on regret. Never laugh at the quiet ones. Storms don't make noise until they strike. You remember it, don't you? The side eyes, the raised eyebrows, the smug little smirks when you spoke up. They called you slow, weird, naive, thought your silence was emptiness. They thought the lack of noise meant lack of depth. But oh, now they're learning the hard way. Still waters don't just run deep. They drown everything in their path when they rise. And guess what? You're rising, not just as a person, but as a force the universe refuses to ignore. See, here's the truth they never saw coming. You were never slow. You were strategic. You were never quiet because you had nothing to say. You were observing, calculating, aligning, and they were too busy performing for each other to notice that they were sitting beside someone the universe had personally activated. They mistook your stillness for stupidity. But now that you're moving in silence and striking in power, every step you take is a reminder that they completely misjudged the battlefield. Now they're the ones looking foolish, trapped in their own ego, unable to look in the mirror without seeing the mistake they made. Because while they were mocking you, the universe was building you, piece by piece. And you know what's worse for them? You didn't even have to lift a hand in revenge. Your existence is the revenge. Your evolution, your glow-up, your clarity, it's dragging their ego across the floor. They thought they were just humiliating you in a classroom, a boardroom, a conversation, a relationship. What they didn't realize is that they were going to war with a system far bigger than you. They weren't just insulting you. They were insulting the choice the universe made when it selected you. And trust me, the universe doesn't forget. You want to know why it hits them so hard now? Because they're starting to realize they didn't just lose a person, they lost alignment. They broke what could have been a bridge, burned what could have been a blessing, rejected what could have elevated them. All because their ego couldn't recognize your light in its raw, unpolished form. Let's pause right here for a second. Chosen one, you need to hear this clearly. Stop feeling guilty for how powerful you're becoming. You didn't trick them. You didn't manipulate your way up. You were always chosen. They just didn't recognize you when you were still in seed form. And now that you've cracked through the soil and begun to rise, they're scrambling, trying to figure out how they missed it. And you need to stop doubting the way you've been built. You keep asking, why was I alone for so long? Why didn't they see me? Why did they leave me out? Hear this. Isolation is the universe's insulation. You weren't alone. You were protected, hidden in plain sight so the wrong ones couldn't ruin the right path. You weren't rejected. You were preserved. You ever see how a diamond is treated in the wild, covered in dirt, unrecognizable, looked over by everyone who doesn't know what they're holding? But put that same diamond under pressure, give it time, and soon the world can't afford to ignore it. That's you. And here's the kicker. The ones who overlooked you, they knew. Deep down, they sensed it. That's why they mocked you louder than they needed to. Because insecure people always attack what they secretly admire. They feared your potential, so they tried to break it before it fully formed. But here you are, whole, alive, sharpened, chosen, and their biggest fear. You didn't need them at all. So when they see you now, walking with power, speaking with clarity, moving like the universe itself cleared a path, they feel it in their chest. It's not just embarrassment, it's regret soaked in shame, tied to the gut punch of knowing they fumbled someone they'll never meet again. But let's flip the mirror for a second. Some of you doubted too. You started to believe the lie, started thinking maybe they were right about you. And I need you to own that, then release it. Because when you doubt your light, you delay your rise. The universe chose you to break patterns, to lead shifts, to change generational stories. And instead, you were shrinking. Why? Because of the noise from people who never even understood your blueprint. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to redefine the room just by standing in it. So stop apologizing for your insight, your silence, your ability to feel 10 layers deep when others barely scratch the surface. That's your power. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes you dangerous in a world full of followers. And as you step into that truth, watch what happens. The universe begins to move. Doors swing open with no handles. Timing becomes your ally. People start sensing something in you they can't quite name but can't ignore. That's alignment. That's flow. That's the system working in your favor because you're finally standing in the energy you were built for. And the ones who played games with your worth? They're watching it all unfold. They feel the shift and they know. They didn't just misjudge you. They disrespected the entire system behind you. And that chosen one is not a mistake that goes unnoticed. Because when you disrespect the chosen, you challenge the very forces that chose them. And that's a battle no one ever wins. So walk boldly, speak less, move sharper, and remember, your silence was never weakness. It was the warning before the quake. Number 2, they never saw you coming because you were built in silence, not for show. They thought silence meant absence, that your quiet meant you had nothing to offer, that your humility was a sign of weakness. But what they failed to realize is that silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy. While they were loud, clumsy, and desperate for attention, you were studying the board, mapping the game, and staying 10 steps ahead without making a sound. You weren't hiding because you were afraid. You were hidden because the universe had you on lockdown while it sharpened your edges in secret. They never saw you coming, not because you lacked brilliance, but because you didn't need their spotlight to validate your power. While they performed for likes, claps, and cheap praise, you were collecting data. You were mastering your own rhythm. You were learning how to see what others missed, hear what others ignored, and move when others froze. You didn't wait for permission. You waited for alignment. And now that the moment is here, your rise feels like a sudden quake. But for you, it's been a long time coming. They looked down on you because you weren't loud about your journey, because you didn't wave your every move like a flag. But that's because you understood something they didn't. Real power moves in silence. The ones who are truly dangerous don't roar before they strike. They wait, they watch, and then they execute without warning. That's what you've become. A silent threat to every system that tried to label you too early, to every person who thought they had you figured out just because you weren't putting on a show. Here's the truth. You never needed their recognition. Chosen ones never do. Your value isn't based on applause. Your genius doesn't crave validation. And your journey was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving the universe right. You were chosen because of your ability to endure the shadows, to trust the process, to grow roots in the dark where no one else could see. They thought you were doing nothing, but beneath the surface, you were becoming undeniable. And now that your moment has arrived, they're shaken, because their arrogance told them you weren't a threat. They laughed at your quiet, dismissed your stillness, labeled you too soft, too passive, not bold enough. But now they're realizing they were never watching the full story. They were judging a book while it was still being written. And now, with every move you make, every level you rise to, They're having to go back and rethink everything they thought they knew about you. This is the part that hurts them the most. You were always capable of this. Always. They just didn't see it. And now that it's unfolding, they don't get to be part of it. They don't get credit. They don't get access. The door is locked, and your silence wasn't just your protection. It was the warning sign they ignored. That's the power of divine strategy. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't beg for attention. It works in whispers and waits for precision. But you need to hear this too, chosen one. Stop questioning why it took so long. It didn't take long. It took exactly the amount of time it was meant to. The universe wasn't slow. It was accurate. You weren't late. You were being prepared. And if you had risen sooner, without the silence, without the strategy, you might have fallen into the same traps they did, needing validation, chasing applause, burning out too soon. Now look at you, sharper, wiser, grounded, and moving with an energy they can't predict or control. That's what scares them. You're not reacting, you're directing. You're not defending, you're deciding. That's what divine strategy does. It puts you in position, not just to survive, but to dominate, calmly, cleanly, and unapologetically. So next time they ask, "Where did you come from?" Smile. Because they'll never understand. They'll never know the quiet battles you fought, the long nights you endured, or the unshakable trust you had in the timing of it all. They'll never grasp that your silence wasn't confusion, it was confidence. Your stillness wasn't fear, it was focus. And your delay, that was divine. Chosen one, you were never behind. You were being refined. They never saw you coming because you weren't meant to be seen until you were unstoppable. Number 3, they laughed, then they watched. Now they can't look away. Every era mocks its revolutionaries right before it imitates them. History doesn't just repeat itself, it screams its warnings in patterns, and the foolish rarely listen. You're not the first chosen one to be cast aside, labeled a dreamer, or dismissed as not good enough. You're walking a path worn down by legends who once stood exactly where you are, misunderstood, underestimated, and quietly gathering momentum while the world wasn't watching. The same world that threw dirt on their names ended up building monuments in their honor. And that's the part people always forget, until it's too late. Nikola Tesla envisioned a future far beyond what the minds around him could grasp. They mocked him, called him mad. But Tesla wasn't chasing applause. He was plugged into something deeper, a current of knowledge that wasn't meant to be immediately understood. Sound familiar? That's the weight of being chosen. You carry visions meant for tomorrow, while everyone else is still clinging to yesterday. And because they couldn't comprehend his brilliance, they rejected it. But guess what? His ideas built the very world we live in now. They had to catch up to what he already knew. Then there's J.K. Rowling, denied over and over, told her story wouldn't sell. They said her words held no value, until her words began to shape an entire generation's imagination. The very stories they rejected went on to become legends. Why? Because they couldn't see the power hidden beneath her persistence. And that's what they did to you too, tossed your name aside, because they couldn't see past your current form. But being rejected isn't the end. It's often the beginning of something the world isn't ready for. And let's not forget Steve Jobs, pushed out of the company he helped build, humiliated, laughed at, exiled from his own creation. But did he crumble? No. He recalibrated, refined. He came back and didn't just reclaim his space. He redefined the entire game. That's the pattern. That's the rhythm of the chosen. Rejection, redirection, then domination. The same world that overlooks you today will one day turn around and pretend they supported you all along. They'll call it fate, luck, a comeback story, when in reality, it was always divine strategy unfolding in real time. They didn't believe in you because they couldn't recognize you. They weren't built to see the future, only the familiar. And you? You were never meant to blend in with what already exists. You were designed to disrupt it. And here's the punchline they'll never admit. The moment they labeled you unworthy, they sealed their own irrelevance. Because the universe doesn't pick people to fit in, it chooses those bold enough to rebuild the frame entirely. Your silence, your rejection, your isolation, it was never the ending. It was the echo of every great before you who walked alone before the world finally caught on. But chosen one, I have to ask, how many times have you doubted yourself just because others didn't see what you carried? How many times did you almost shrink to fit into a world that was never built for your kind of power? Don't you see? The path you're on is ancient. It's carved by giants who were also laughed at before they were quoted in textbooks, studied in universities, and admired by the very people who once doubted them. That ache you feel, that tension between knowing you're meant for more and being ignored by the masses, that's not a flaw. That's the pressure that makes diamonds, the isolation that creates leaders, the silence that sharpens vision. You're not falling behind, you're following the same map that every revolutionary soul has followed before you. And don't be fooled, your rise will make them uncomfortable. Just like Tesla's inventions, Rowling's imagination, and Jobs' return did. Because when chosen ones ascend, they force the world to confront its own short-sightedness. Your success is a mirror, and it exposes how wrong they were when they thought you were nothing. So the next time you're tempted to think it's over, that you've missed your shot, that being unseen means being unworthy, remember the pattern. The ignored always rise, the rejected always return, the misunderstood always reshape the story. And when it happens, the same mouths that once laughed will whisper your name with awe. You don't need their approval. You were never waiting on their applause. You are walking the steps of legends. And one day, someone will study your rise as part of the pattern. Number 4, they thought you were quiet, but you were forging fire in the dark. Power doesn't shout from rooftops. It sharpens its blade in silence, then cuts through empires without warning. They saw you sitting in silence and assumed you were standing still. They watched your quiet seasons and thought you were stagnant, stuck, or lost. But what they couldn't see, what they still don't understand, is that silence isn't absence, it's alchemy. It's where the real work begins. The shadows weren't your prison. They were your forge, and while they were chasing applause and validation, you were building something they'll never be able to touch. Unshakable, unstoppable power. The chosen ones have never been interested in putting on a show. They don't move for claps or cheer for the crowd. That's the curse of the shallow, needing constant recognition just to feel real. But you were made for something deeper. You were built in the dark hours when nobody believed, when nobody clapped, when nobody asked if you were okay. And that, chosen one, is your greatest weapon. You've been moving through life like a phantom, unseen, underestimated, quietly enduring. You watched the loud ones take up space, watched the arrogant trip over their own egos. And while they craved the spotlight, you made peace with the shadows, because you knew anything truly powerful doesn't show its hand. A storm doesn't ask for permission before it arrives. It builds, it gathers, and then one day it strikes. That's what you've become. A quiet storm. a force of nature that no one saw coming because they were too busy underestimating your stillness. And now, every step you take is different, grounded, focused, lethal in its precision. Not because you're angry, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've done the work in silence, and it's time. Let them keep dancing in their delusions. Let them post their highlight reels and chase empty praise. They think visibility is victory. They think loud is powerful. But here's what they'll learn far too late. What's built in silence doesn't break under pressure. You've been tested where no one could see. You've bled behind closed doors. You've cried into the void, begged the universe for answers, and in return, it gave you resilience, depth, clarity, and most of all, control. You see, true power isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives like a shift in the wind, subtle at first, then undeniable. The most dangerous thing about you isn't your words or your presence. It's the fact that no one knows the full extent of what you're capable of. And that mystery, that silence, that's the part that keeps them guessing. That's what makes them nervous every time your name comes up. They thought you were slow, but you were studying. They thought you were passive, but you were preparing. They thought you were weak, but you were weaponizing your pain into precision. And when chosen ones rise, it never comes with a warning. It comes with impact. Suddenly, everything changes. The same people who couldn't say your name are now whispering it. The same ones who laughed are now watching in silence, hoping you don't remember. But you do. You remember everything. And yet, you're not even rising for revenge. You're rising because it's time, because you've outgrown the shadows. And now the world has no choice but to face the light you've become. But let's not forget, you almost gave up. There were moments you felt invisible, moments you thought the shadows meant failure. But what you didn't realize then is that the universe hides its most powerful creations. Not to punish them, but to prepare them. The shadows weren't working against you. They were working for you. They were your training ground. And now that the work is done, now that the pieces have clicked into place, you move differently. You no longer flinch at disrespect. You no longer crave validation. You know who you are. You know what you carry. And more importantly, you know what silence is worth. So keep moving in calculated steps. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Because the greatest advantage you have is that they never see you coming. They still think you're quiet. They still think you're soft. But by the time they realize what you really are, it's already too late. Remember this, chosen one. Your power wasn't born on a stage. It was forged in the quiet, in the hidden, in the shadows where no one dared to look. And now, there's no need to speak loudly. You are the message. You are the shift. You are the consequence. Number 5. They paid the price for betting against the wrong soul. The biggest mistake your enemies made wasn't hating you. It was thinking you didn't matter. They thought you were forgettable. They thought your silence was submission. They thought they had you all figured out, labeled, boxed, dismissed. But what they failed to realize is this: underestimating a chosen one always carries a cost. And that cost, it's paid in regret, in shattered pride, in the slow burn of watching you become everything they swore you'd never be. That's the curse of arrogance. It blinds the mind, inflates the ego, and convinces fools that their perception is reality. They convince themselves you weren't smart enough, strong enough, worthy enough. They believed that because you didn't seek validation, you lacked value. That because you weren't loud, you lacked presence. They confused dominance with depth, noise with intelligence, and performance with purpose. And now, They're stuck choking on the dust of their own delusion. Because while they were playing games of status and shouting for attention, you were becoming the one thing they never planned for. Undeniable. You didn't demand a spotlight. You became the light. And now the same mouths that doubted you are quiet. Not out of respect, but out of shock, out of fear, out of realization that they missed something rare. And there's no do-over this time. The truth is, most people don't recognize power unless it screams. But your kind, you were never meant to scream. You were built to disrupt silently. They underestimated you because their minds were shallow, only able to process what was loud, visible, easy to categorize. They didn't know how to read your kind of intelligence, your kind of presence, your kind of energy. So instead of trying to understand it, they mocked it. And now they pay. That's what happens when arrogance meets the unknown. It crumbles. And don't get it twisted. Some of them knew. Deep down, they sensed the power in you, but admitting it meant facing their own insecurity. It meant acknowledging that someone they thought was beneath them was actually miles ahead. So instead, they clung tighter to their illusion and bet against you. But what happens when the one you ignored becomes the one everyone's watching? What happens when the person you laughed at becomes the blueprint? That's the cost. That's the consequence of underestimation. And now they're feeling it. They're watching you from the sidelines, powerless, muted, irrelevant, because they wasted their chance. They had access when your value wasn't understood by the masses. They could have built with you, supported you, aligned with you, but their pride told them you had nothing to offer. And pride? Pride has a short shelf life when truth shows up. So now they sit with that bitterness. They scroll and they stare. They replay every interaction, every dismissal, every smug little glance they threw your way. And they feel it. Not just embarrassment, loss. Because it's not just that you proved them wrong, it's that you proved them insignificant in a story they thought they were writing. But let's turn the mirror for a second. Chosen one, don't you ever forget this moment, because it's proof. Proof that silence doesn't equal weakness. That humility isn't ignorance. That being overlooked isn't the end, it's the setup. And next time someone tries to diminish your light because it doesn't fit their shallow idea of strength, you won't even flinch. You'll remember this exact chapter, the cost they paid for betting against you. Let it be motivation, let it be fuel, let it be a reminder that your path isn't to impress, it's to impact. The world may be slow to recognize real power, but when it does, it bows. And when it bows, the ones who turned their backs on you have to live with the reality that they were on the wrong side of the story. So keep walking, not to prove them wrong, but to continue proving the universe right. Because you were never late, never lost, never lacking. You were just underestimated. And now, they're learning what that mistake costs. Every single day. Number 6. The ones they laughed at became the ones they couldn't escape. Arrogance builds thrones on sand. By the time the tide rises, it's already too late. Here's the harsh truth. The downfall of the arrogant isn't an accident. It's inevitable. It's written into the fabric of time. Pride makes people blind. It convinces them they're untouchable, irreplaceable, above correction. But history always humbles the loudest mouths with the quietest storms. The very people they laughed at, overlooked, dismissed as insignificant, those are the ones who rise up and burn the script. They didn't see you coming because they didn't want to. They were too busy sizing people up by what's easy to measure: volume, image, titles, connections. You didn't scream for attention. You didn't parade your power. You didn't beg to be seen. And in their arrogance, they mistook that for weakness. But you weren't hiding. You were loading, quietly becoming everything they never expected, and now they can't unsee you. That's what makes the fall of the arrogant so brutal. Not just the crash, but who's standing tall when the dust settles. You, the one they dismissed, the one they whispered about, the one they swore would never be more than a background character. Now you are the narrative, and the ones who used to dominate the space. They're ghosts, echoes, footnotes. You want proof? History's overflowing with it. They saw David and laughed. A boy with no armor, no title, no reputation, but the same stone they mocked became the weapon that rewrote the outcome. Why? Because underestimated power is the most dangerous kind. It strikes from nowhere. And by the time they understand what's happening, the giant has already fallen. They looked at Einstein and saw a late-blooming, quiet child who didn't speak on schedule. And yet that same child would go on to bend time, decode reality, and outthink the very systems that tried to label him. He didn't need noise. He was building new worlds in silence. They saw Oprah, a woman with pain in her past, a name with no legacy behind it, just a local face reading the news. And now, she is a legacy, a walking empire, a name that echoes far beyond screens. That's the pattern, over and over. The arrogant scoff at the ones who move quietly, the ones who don't beg, the ones who don't demand the mic, because they are the message. And that chosen one is exactly where you've always belonged. You may not have had the fanciest title, the loudest voice, or the easiest path, but that was never the point. You were never supposed to start at the top. You were supposed to build your way there while they laughed, because the higher you climb in silence, the harder it hits when you arrive. The arrogant never think they'll fall. That's what makes them arrogant. They think their status is eternal, that their mockery is harmless, that their position is earned by default. But time has a funny way of flipping the script. And when it does, the same people who once belittled you start copying you, studying you, needing you. But by then, it's too late. See, your rise was never meant to be announced. It was meant to interrupt. And that's what's happening now. You're becoming the storm that doesn't shout thunder, but moves mountains. You're walking proof that silent strength isn't just real. It's lethal to ego. And now the ones who dismissed you are watching their own image crumble in comparison to what you've become. But let's keep it real for a second. You felt the weight of that rejection. You've questioned why you were always the one being overlooked. You've wondered why your path seemed so invisible while others walked red carpets paved in mediocrity. But now you understand. Invisibility was the training ground. While they were getting praise for shallow victories, you were building something that couldn't be ignored, not even by them. And now, here you are, still standing, still growing, still rising. And every step you take echoes back to those who swore you wouldn't make it. They hear it, loud and clear. Their fall isn't just a result of their arrogance. It's a consequence of ignoring greatness in its quietest form. So don't shrink, don't explain, don't soften your edge for those who once laughed at your silence. Let your presence speak, let your journey stand. Because the fall of the arrogant isn't just about their pride breaking. It's about the world finally recognizing you were the one worth watching all along. And now, they can't look away. Number 7. The moment they realize you were never the joke, they were. First they laugh, then they watch, and finally They remember they were warned.
Yeah, fine.
It doesn't start with fireworks. It never does. It starts with a shift, so subtle they almost miss it. Your name slips into a conversation they weren't expecting. A mutual connection shares something you created. Someone they respect suddenly respects you. At first, they brush it off. A fluke, a one-off. Surely not you. Not the one they dismissed, mocked, doubted. Not the one they spent years treating like a background character in their self-centered story. But then it happens again and again. Your energy starts to ripple into places they thought you'd never reach. Your presence starts showing up in rooms they once swore you'd never enter. You become a name that makes people pause. They see it in someone's caption, hear it mentioned in a meeting, feel it in the tension of a conversation where your name suddenly means something. At first, they try to ignore it. Pride will do that. It builds walls of denial to protect fragile egos. But there's no wall thick enough to keep out momentum. The universe doesn't ask for permission to shift the balance. It just moves. And when it moves in your favor, the same people who threw dirt on your name find themselves buried in the weight of their own regret. That's when it hits them, not all at once, but like a slow drip of reality flooding the room. They were wrong about you. Not just a little wrong, catastrophically wrong, and worse. You don't even need to say anything. Your actions, your progress, your undeniable glow. It says everything. They start replaying every interaction in their head. Every time they smirked, every time they rolled their eyes, every moment they spoke your name with condescension or didn't speak it at all. They feel the heat of those memories now, and it burns. Because now you're stepping into the exact power they denied you. You're walking with confidence that doesn't scream, because it doesn't need to. Their laughter, gone, replaced with forced silence, with tension, with that awkward, unspoken shift in how they now look at you. They don't know how to respond to your rise, because nothing about it fits the version of you they created in their heads. You outgrew their imagination and their comfort. This is the moment of reckoning, not for you, for them. Because here's what they're realizing. They didn't just misjudge you, they misjudged the system that chose you. They thought they were dealing with a small player, but they were standing in the presence of someone chosen by the universe itself, someone with purpose pulsing through their veins, someone who didn't need their approval because the only validation that mattered was already encoded into your destiny. And now that it's all unfolding, they're scrambling, trying to rewrite the story in their heads, trying to act like they knew all along, but they didn't. And they know it. You were never the fluke. Their ignorance was. But let's talk about you, chosen one, because you felt every ounce of that doubt. You carried their disrespect in your bones. You stayed silent while they talked over you. You questioned your own voice because the noise around you was so loud. You sat through seasons of invisibility, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they were right about you. But they weren't. That silence, it was your sharpening season. That doubt, it was their fear projected onto you. That underestimation. It was the prelude to this exact moment. Now, you've become something undeniable. You don't just walk into a room, you shift it. Not because you're louder, but because you're aligned. Because you stopped asking for recognition and started living in truth. And truth doesn't need a spotlight. It becomes the sun. So let them watch. Let them sit in the discomfort of realization. Let them struggle to find the words to describe what they're feeling. Because this moment, the one they swore would never come, is here. And it doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need explanation. It just needs you, fully present in your power, walking like you were never the underdog, because you weren't. They were just blind. Now they see. Number 8, the tables turned while they were too busy looking down. They thought they had you pegged, thought they understood your story, your limits, your potential. They were confident in their assumptions, smug even. But now they're stunned, shaken, watching in disbelief as everything they thought about you unravels in front of them. The dynamics have shifted, and they're scrambling to make sense of it. How did this happen? How didn't we see it? But those questions come too late. Because here's the truth they've finally been forced to face. They were never in control. They weren't winning. They weren't ahead. They were being outmaneuvered the entire time. Not by tricks, not by force, but by patience. While they were playing loud and messy, you were moving quiet and sharp. Every step you took in silence was a step toward this exact moment. And now they're buried beneath the weight of their own misjudgment. Their arrogance convinced them you were small, that you weren't a threat, that your silence meant absence. But that silence was strategy. That quiet was growth. And now your presence is so undeniable it makes the ground shake when you walk in. You didn't rise with a bang. You didn't make announcements. You simply became too powerful to ignore. That's what haunts them now. Not just that you succeeded, but that you did it without needing them, without proving anything. You became what they could never imagine, and it's too late for them to catch up. Their regret is silent, but loud in their eyes. They're watching you, not as a peer, but as a reminder of everything they got wrong. And you don't need to celebrate out loud. You don't need a spotlight. Your victory is the silence. The kind of silence that echoes. The kind of silence that haunts. You've become something their pride never prepared for. And in that becoming, you've won. Number 9, you didn't just win. You redefined the whole game. You don't have to humiliate them. You don't have to lift a finger. They're doing it to themselves. Every time your name is mentioned in rooms they swore you'd never enter, every time your work speaks louder than their noise ever did, they feel it. That burning twist in their gut, that's not jealousy, that's shame. Because deep down, they know they had front row seats to something powerful and didn't even realize it. You don't need revenge. You are the revenge. Your success, your silence, your rise, it speaks for itself, and it's loud, not in volume, but in impact. The kind of power that doesn't need an audience to be real. The kind of energy that shifts dynamics without saying a word. While they were busy trying to be seen, you became unavoidable. You didn't just grow, you evolved into something they can't define, can't reach, and definitely can't fake. That's what cuts deepest. Because now, everything about you contradicts the narrative they tried to write. You were never the underdog. You were the standard. They just didn't have the vision to see it. Now, your story is more than a comeback. It's a blueprint. You've become the walking evidence that being overlooked is never the end. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. You're the symbol now. The reminder that staying true to your path, even when no one believes in it, is a victory they'll never understand. And for every silent warrior watching you, you've just opened a door they thought was locked forever. As for the ones who doubted you, trust this. They'll never make that mistake again. Not with you. Not with anyone like you. You've reset their definition of power. You've rewritten their understanding of what success really looks like. And that sting they feel every time your name enters a room, that's not coincidence. That's consequence. You didn't just rise. You changed everything. And now, chosen one,